Okay. So is there any questions from the audience first for our panel, more general questions, or if you want to come back on some of the talks? And anyone, please come and be close to the X that's our microphone to be sure that Maggie can.
We could maybe repeat the question.
Yes.
Oh, we can also do that. Yes. Okay. I see there's two. Okay. I will go with this person first and this. Okay. Please do.
I have a question about conspiracy theorists. Would you say they are rather reflective thinkers? Because I don't like I am presented a piece of news. I don't think everybody would just go like, huh, that sounds fishy. So I don't know, do you think it sounds that the people who find conspiracy theories compelling are actually doing some reflective thinking rather than visual.
So Meg, I don't know if you heard that. The question is whether people who believe conspiracies are reflective. So what, and I'll let you answer that, Maggie, because I know you'll say no, given your results.
You don't know that, Gord.
No, because we colluded beforehand and I know all the answers. But I think there's one important distinction, Maggie, just before to jump in.
Yeah.
There's consumers and creators in the space of conspiracies, and the same there is for other things. And so a conspiracy theorist in one form of that is people who develop elaborate theories and then post them on the internet. And those people, in order to construct the theories, have to reason about it. I don't think that is the typical mode for conspiracy believers, which is the most of the public who are consuming YouTube videos and doing it, and they're doing it passively, and people who are more reflective are less likely to believe conspiracies because it's a feature of being intuitive and not being credulous and stuff like that. Maggie, do you have an additional answer to that?
Yeah, no, I'll add to that. No, I think this is a great question, and I actually appreciate the question because it gives me another opportunity to kind of make kind of a comment why the term conspiracy theorist really troubles me, because to suggest that someone is a conspiracy theorist, like it's like it defines the person in some way, right? I think the term conspiracy belief is just something that, conspiracy beliefs can be sort of housed as part of a cognitive architecture, and people can have varying levels of belief in different conspiracies, and so conspiracy theorist just connotes that it somehow kind of defines someone as like a something about the entire, like, to call someone a conspiracy theorist just has all those problematic features that I mentioned. If you want to neutralize the term and look at the breadth of kind of conspiratorial thinking, I don't know that we should have a term that kind of embodies you on a dimension, the degree to which you're a conspiratorial thinker or not. I think people vary to different degrees on specific conspiracy theories. It's more like my side thinking, right? I wouldn't call someone a my side theorist. I don't know. Maybe that's a good example. People have varying levels of belief in, different issues, just the same way they may on conspiracy belief. So I think it's more close to that phenomenon. And so this is why I hesitate to use the word conspiracy theorist. I think these psychological mechanisms, your question about reflection, I think we want to think about these underlying psychological mechanisms like actively open-minded thinking. Then suddenly let's talk about degree of reflection, for a given individual, and how does that then relate to endorsement of conspiracy beliefs, for example, right? Like, I think then we have something to work with that we can study at that individual difference level, as opposed to thinking of, conspiracy beliefs as some dimension in the same way. I think it's qualitatively different. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
And let's be honest, are we sure that Epstein didn't kill himself? Okay, sorry.
Okay. Is that okay for anyone from the panel? Okay. There was another question. Can you come closer to the mic, please?
I can just repeat.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I keep forgetting about that. Yeah, we'll repeat.
During this whole day, I thought of a concept that would have been announced, but yet I either missed it or I didn't hear it. It was of and the dissonance, where two ideas which are contrary one to another simultaneously exist in one mind. And I would have thought that there would have been some subject about it. Maybe that you have all seen something similar, whereas one person, or perhaps more likely, someone could see that maybe concept A, which contradict principle B, and principle B, which contradict principle A, are both present for a patient and for someone and the subjects that you as a subject. Can these two principles coexist in the same mind? And if that person say yes or say no, will have been an inference to the degree of conspiracies or beliefs.
What you got? Yes.
Wow. Well, maybe
Maybe you rephrase it for Maggie.
the whole idea is how you can integrate cognitive dissonance into these whole theoretical frameworks. And the only thing I can think of immediately is conflict detection. Because conflict detection is a situation where you have a reflective idea conclusion and you have an intuitive belief that contradicts it. And the two exist. No problem. What it does is it slows you down. Slows you down, doesn't stop you from making your conclusion. So you could expand it. You could say, if I believe that Epstein didn't kill himself, right? But part of you knows that he did. Right? So you've got these two ideas, and when you're talking to your buddies on Fox News, you could say, well, I believe it's fake. He got murdered. Trump killed him. No, that would be the New York Times. Trump killed him. But then you'd be a little uncomfortable with it, or vice versa. So that's one way.
I can give you an explicit example from our own work, because we've done versions of like this sort of debunking thing that is confronting people with counter arguments that expressly is like a cognitive dissonance framework. So what we do in that case is it's all Republicans in the study. At the start of the study, we ask them a bunch of essentially leading questions that everyone agrees with. Do you want to have a president or a king? They want a president. Is it important that there's a separation of powers? Should Congress have the power of the purse? Should the president be constrained by the judiciary? They all agree with these things at like a high level. Okay, they strongly agree with those views. And then what we say is, and then we ask them, okay, do you think Trump is supporting democracy, or do you think he's undermining it? And they all think he's supporting democracy. And then we say, we have an AI be like, here's what you said. Here's a bunch of things that Trump is doing that violates the thing that you said. Undermining the power of the purse. So we're like doing all this giving examples and stuff like that. And then people kind of argue back and forth. And what you find is that you get a decrease in people's views of whether they think Trump is supporting democracy. And it carries over to lower support for Trump. I'm trying to get deported. But in terms of cognitive dissonance, what you don't find, which is the cognitive dissonance explanation, would be that people, because of that, we're creating a dissonance where they think that they want a president. They're having evidence that the president is acting like a king, but they would therefore be like, oh, actually, I want a king. They don't go back. They don't change their prior views. They still hold to the values they said. They just update their view of what Trump is doing to some extent. Like, it's not 20%, it's more like 10%, but yeah. Anyways.
Can I just follow up on that? I hope Maggie can hear me too. I'm really curious, in the conspiracy domain, do you always rely on self-report? Because it seems to me that I can tell you 2 weeks later or 2 months later, yeah, I don't really believe that anymore because I know that you talked me out of it. But I might still believe it, and I might with my friends say it. And so I do wonder, to what extent have you debunked something, or have you just told people what you're believing has facts against it? And so they're more reluctant to actually argue back against it. So my question really is, are there other measures you could use, more like the ones that, say, Henry and Valerie talked about this morning, where you're seeing the inferences or the consequences that they're drawing, or something else that they're saying that isn't just relying on self-report?
So maybe not directly. So a few things. One is belief in other conspiracies also goes down. So even though although they would maybe make an inference that they shouldn't believe those also, and so it's sort of the same, but which is a kind of wild finding in its own. We ask things like behavioral intention things like, if someone else told you about this conspiracy, would you agree with them or not? They say they wouldn't. That's kind of lame. The one thing about the 2 months later is they don't really remember what Like these are people who do online studies. So like I don't know how much they would be like, oh yes, these people told me not to believe it, and I therefore don't believe it. Final thing I'll say is that they believe conspiracies and they aren't very happy to admit that they're wrong about conspiracies. So like the acquiescence it probably goes the other direction. If anything, I think they're probably underreporting how much they agree to save face, but we don't really know for sure. Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah. Maybe I'll add a quick point to that. I mean, it was based on something you said earlier today, Gord. Like one of the things that surprised me in this work is the amount of endorsement of conspiracy beliefs we get in our samples. I'm actually surprised the other way. I'm less concerned about self-report. People seem quite willing. I can't remember the number if you did report a number, but I think we're seeing at least 60% of the sample endorsing some conspiratorial ideation, right? So there's no lack of it. It's not a floor effect. It's out there. So I think I'm less concerned about the reporting of it, and I think we're able to systematically investigate it based on what people are giving us. So, but the idea of other measures is interesting. I'm not sure how we do that, but it's an interesting idea for sure.
Sorry, I have another conspiracy theories question.
Yeah, say again.
So, among this whole discussion, I'm surprised that we haven't spoken about trust, which is one of the biggest predictors of belief in conspiracy theories. And in that sense, I wonder if, is belief in conspiracy theories really a failure of like lack of deliberation or something to do with reasoning processes, or is it about deferring those reasoning processes to someone else who's gathered the information, and I trust that the information they're giving me is reliable? And the same could apply to fake news, I suppose. If you trust that the source from which the news comes from is real, and you don't have any other way to assess it, you can't know everything, so we have to rely on others that they're telling us information. We choose to believe in it. So perhaps we can see trust as a heuristic in that way. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, so I'll tell you another experiment, and then hopefully other people can talk too. Sorry, guys. We did an experiment where it was like, so the experiment that I just talked about where we tell Republicans that they're wrong about Trump supporting democracy, or we have another experiment where it's about corruption or whatever. We did another version of that where we told them the bot you're going to get information from is trained on Democrat sources, versus a condition where we said it was neutral, and another condition where it was trained on Democrat sources, and we got the bot to be adversarial. It was basically a jerk to them. It did not change the results at all. It had no impact whatsoever on the belief updating because the evidence and the reasons were the same. I wish I could have put it in the talk. It didn't fit as well with the narrative, but and so like that isn't to say that trust isn't important. Trust is important in contexts where it's ambiguous, where you don't know whether the information is right or wrong. If you have a really strong argument that is evidently true, or like then you don't need to trust the person to believe it because it's just evidently true. This is also the case in like news headline studies. We've done ones where you remove the source and it has basically no impact at all. But there's still a correlation where the good sources are believed way more than the bad sources, but it's because they're producing believable content, not because people blindly trust the sources. And so I think source trust is not irrelevant, but for the kind of stuff that we're talking about, it's not as irrelevant as you might think.
You think it might have more relevance in the context of acquiring those beliefs as opposed to trying to get rid of those beliefs?
I think it's possible because that is the way in which it matters is how you make the choice of what information to seek. And so like, which is different from passively assessing information that we're providing them, what we're doing in our studies. So I think absolutely, yeah.
There's a question.
Something to add?
No, I'm just processing it a little bit. I mean, it's funny. I went to a conference last summer on the psychology of trust, and I think it was a social psychology conference. And I think something that you alluded to actually earlier, Gord, like one of the reasons that we're so caught up with this topic, I think, and why we have so much work to do in this topic is, I think, a more general trust of our institutional things like media, science. You mentioned science. I think there is something about this environment where sort of these trust in these organized systems, why, you know, I don't know if we need to study this and the relationships that are happening, but I do think that trust is an important variable, but how we study that and think about it is obviously going to be very important to see if there's something going on here. So yeah, no, I guess I just want to echo the importance of that, and the fact that you made that connection, I think is cool. Yeah.
Yes, and then Ryan.
Still, it's related to conspiracy, but also.
That's the last conspiracy question we need to move on to.
If it could, I wonder if people who are more prone to believe in conspiracies are also more prone to use statistical strategies when encountering and processing information. I'm just wondering, do you think there might be a correlation? Because it sounds like in the face of counterexample conspiracy, I don't know. Do they change their beliefs based on counterexamples, or does it change? Does it take more counterexamples for them to change their beliefs, like in contrast to counterexample makers?
Okay.
Conspiracy question, but for Henry.
Yeah, so that's permitted.
But I think there are conspiracies, right? There are real conspiracies. And so what you're talking about are conspiracies that are only supported by a local ecology of facts or presentations, right? So if you're in an environment where everybody says that Epstein was murdered, right? Okay. And everybody says that you'll be picking this up. And somebody comes along and says, well, you know what? Hey, I read an article in the New York Times and it's not true. And what I would guess is that if you were a statistical reasoner, you would simply update your belief and say, well, 10,000 people have told me that he was murdered. One person says, I'll still continue believing it. And if you're a counterexample reasoner, you would go, wait a minute, there's another source, and maybe you would go further. So that's just a guess, but.
So the debunking
story.
manipulation should be most effective with counterexample reasons.
Yes.
So that's a testable
But we know that
hypothesis.
already. We've done the study,
Right.
but not for conspiracy theories.
Right,
That's right.
So
Not for real
yeah,
ones.
Gordon Watts will have better effect on.
Yeah, Gore's got.
That's true.
Send me the scale, I'll throw it on some.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's a follow-up question.
I'm gonna go to.
Pretty much the same question. So.
It was the same. All right. Okay.
You're permitted.
Go ahead.
I guess this is a question for Professor Thompson. So I'm just wondering, for people also related to conspiracy theorists, for conspiracy theorists who refuse to give up their beliefs, do you think it has something to do with like they just refuse to give up something that's objectively unsolvable? Like, is there something correlated or related in there?
No, I think we're talking about different kinds of giving up. So like giving up a task versus changing one's mind. I'm not sure one can equate these two processes psychologically.
Any other questions? Yes, and then yes.
Kind of follow-up to your question. Do you believe there's a connection to the feeling of rightness? And so indeed, when we are reinforcing our belief, for example, like we're doing it with a large language model, we are changing the feeling of rightness of the previous belief?
I think there's a lot of metacognition that's involved in these belief change experiments, that people have to track the status of their current beliefs, the status of each piece of information as they come in. And clearly, you know, the even though you get 20% of the people to change their minds, 80% of the people don't. Right. And so it suggests to me that people are starting out from a point of very strong certainty that, you know, and then that also allows them to evaluate, if you will, the information that as it comes in. It's like probably a two-pronged process.
And so two things on that. One is that the modal level of confidence in the written conspiracies is 100%. That is the most common form, is that The second thing is that we have the study on overconfidence as a trait, and that's a whole other conversation, but we think we can measure overconfidence as a trait. And there's some people who are more overconfident regardless of what the task is than others. And people who believe conspiracies are more overconfident, not unsurprisingly. But also what we did in this case is we asked them to estimate the percent of people they think agree with them to get a sense of, the extent to which they are willing to accept the possibility of being wrong. And so like we have, as an example, take the Sandy Hook conspiracy, so kind of a wild conspiracy, only 8% of people in our sample thought it was true. Okay, so it's a tiny minority. Among the 8% that said it was true, they thought 61% of people agreed with them. So they thought they were in the majority. And that was particularly true for the most overconfident of the believers they both believed conspiracies more and overestimated how much people agree with them more. Okay, so they're miscalibrated, both from reality and just from, it just doesn't occur to them that they could be wrong about it.
Thank you, David.
Okay.
Has the notion of secrecy and lying been left out in this research to some extent? Because, as far as I can see, because we don't say political parties are conspiracies, but they're planning to take over the government. But they're going to
Yeah.
These are extreme conspiracies, like the moon landing, we're relying on a vast scale and secrecy across whole disciplines. Right? Well, that's something. And only go back to my disagreement. And I think something for me about this research is the core matter for me is we're giving participants information, positive information, that's potentially relevant to solving a problem or answering a question that could be asked about some conclusion following the problem. And then we're telling them to ignore part of it, right?
Is that a conspiracy theory?
Yeah.
And only use a subset of this information, right? That's the general form. And something of that. So that's connected with our disagreement. I'm saying that right, some kind of some kind of notion of decoupling or setting aside quite a bit of stuff, which you intentionally, as the experimenter, give to people. Statistical information, so we'll set that aside. Here's a question. I'm sort of ignoring all that.
Can I ask a follow-up about that? Like, so is that you're talking about like Christian maxims, like take the dilemma case you talked about. Humpty Dumpty is on the wall, then he falls. Humpty Dumpty is on the wall, Humpty Dumpty is not on the wall and he falls.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about the wall?
Yeah.
It violates the assumption that you're saying something. There's a reason why you're saying something, and so like I think maybe that's what you're kind of talking about. It's maybe true in all cases that we do these studies, that the participant enters a situation in which they're engaged in a hypothetical reality, even if it's not inherently about hypothetical. They're going along with the task, and so I think that's like partly, at least for the fact that and for online studies, this is totally commonplace for participants. I mean, therefore, I don't think it's that much of a problem actually, because they're easily do it. But
suddenly you get this information. What was relevant before becomes irrelevant because it's conditionally independent of this. Humpty Dumpty is drunk, and now the wall was important before. Now it's not. It doesn't matter about whether it's on the wall or not, because it's that they have to grasp that to make these dynamic.
Right?
Yeah, I was asking myself, is it possible that the structure of the structure of this information, the way it is presented, would be like some explanation to why people believe it. For example, I know there's this right-wing influencer named Candace Owen, which is followed by people from the left and also from the right. And the way she tells like her conspiracy theory is like in the same way as like the crime novel, you know, like she has like this way of like dealing conspiracy, and like it's really interesting because there's like also people from the left and the right that maybe in both of the conspiracy. So maybe like the way to introduce the conspiracy would be like some kind of
I mean, the way that I would think about that relates to what Val was talking about is that you need fluency for people to go along. You want to avoid triggering what the thing that says something, there's something off with this. So you walk them along and you try to, and so this is like like Scientology. They don't, you have to go up the steps. And by the time you got to the end, it's like, oh, this is totally, these ideas, no offense to any Scientologists in the room, but they get wild at the end. But you don't get that at the start. So you have to kind of move it along. And you have to avoid people recognizing that there's something off about this. And also it's just like engagement and attention, and we live in an attention economy. So there's another question back there.
I think it's actually and how much did we enforce the idea of how all the conspiracies teach you as well, like a statistical reason, and you basically you see that as an enforcement. And how everything is.
Well, that's it's a false inference.
Maggie in on the question.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Maggie.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't able to quite hear that
Yes,
question.
if some conspiracies are true.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And then the resulting being, if it's true, does that reinforce other conspiracies?
Well, if there's a correlation between holding true and false conspiracies, right? And so I think that's the issue, is how, a lot of these variables that I was presenting in my presentation, they don't dissociate between true and false conspiracies. So a tendency to believe in hidden causal forces, if you think that whatever happened to Princess Diana is related to what the government's doing with fluoride, to what corporations did with tobacco companies, like if there's this overriding idea of some hidden causal force, many of these other kinds of scales don't help us discern, and we need something that helps with people to discern different kinds of information. And right now, I think this is where we're very excited about the AOT and very proud that it came from our field of research, that something very valuable and I think important in the world. And how do we integrate this idea of, when you're presented with new information, what do you do with it? And this gives me a chance to actually mention a concept I wanted to mention before, Gord, that comes from one of your papers, the idea of meta beliefs, right? I think this idea of belief change, the longer I've been in the field, the more I'm not sure whether that's a terrific metric, because there may be a lot of good reasons for people not to change some of their beliefs. I think it has to do with to what extent we think we should be adjusting our beliefs and actually evaluating new information. It's quite possible that someone's evaluating the information, but then choosing not to adjust or change their beliefs. And shouldn't that be part of the picture we're mapping out here? And that should be important too, from a reasoning perspective. So anyway, I took that in a little bit of a different direction, and getting us to think more broadly about maybe how to approach these things too, Valerie, right? In terms of, from a meta level, what should we ultimately be looking at? Change in beliefs, or, response to new information. There's so many elements there, aren't there?
Well, interestingly, one of the things I was thinking about while Gord was talking and while you were talking was, some of my very firmly held beliefs. And we can take the example of climate change. How would I behave in the context where there's a robot trying to convince me that it's not real and not caused by humans? So am I now like a conspiracy theorist, or like, this stubborn person that just refuses to revoke her beliefs in the light of new arguments and new evidence? But I think this speaks to what Maggie has just said, that like there's a meta belief that that the evidence that I have already has been produced by people who are honest and rigorous and have offered it in good faith, and that I should therefore probably hold pretty firmly to that kind of belief. What would you do with that robot, you know? It's like-
Argue. Right.
But it's got more facts than you do, right? It's
Make a good
really
argument.
I think the trust issue though is an important one because you don't know the science, right? I'm assuming you just trust the reports and you trust the scientists. But if you don't trust them, I know people who don't trust science, then you have no problems with that. So one of the things that's going on is what are your sources, right? And how much confidence you make.
Right, but it's not blind trust. I think it's important to keep in mind. Like that is, we have to trust reports from others for almost everything. Very few of the things that we believe are based on direct experience. Even at like, I haven't been to Iran. You know, I haven't seen, like I haven't tried to swim through the Strait of Hormuz. I think the water's still flowing. It's open in that way. But so we need that. And then like Steve Stolman has work on this, like the knowledge illusion or whatever. Most of the things that we think we know are kind of like that. But so on the science thing, it's like, I mean, you trust science, but you trust the process of science. There's a basis for the trust. Like you know that in order to make the argument that like all the climate scientists are wrong, you have to assume some sort of like massive unexplained mechanism of like collusion or whatever it would be. And given that you know how the product science produces, then you can trust it, but it's not like trust the same way that I trust my mom. You know, think of it like yeah. I do trust my mom, but yeah, not for her opinions on climate change.
I would grant okay, no, go ahead.
A quick one, but I'm puzzled a bit because obviously we're discussing a lot of psychologies. We're focusing on the actors, how do they think, how do they reason. For example, what would you say is the basic metric of something being true? Like I come from the philosophy perspective, so let's say obviously for the mental logic, mental models, for the like thing whether there's a contradictory case, which is well, the name of the game in philosophy, it's like, oh, I've got a very elaborate prediction of what you say. And statistically speaking, reasoning is very good for functioning on a daily basis. Like I truly believe there's 4 bottles of plastic water on the table, maybe like that, and oh, they're made of glass or they're fake bottle. I don't know, but most of the time when it's like pragmatic encroachment and things we want, it's like people are pretty closely navigating with a true correspondence belief, like I believe the truth is this, and my mind's tracking. While we have elaborate social, political, religious conspiracy beliefs, then obviously it's something you hold dear often as part of your identity, right? I'm really committed to the idea that we never landed in the moon, but obviously it doesn't have much impact to daily life. Like whether USA went or did not went, I'm still gonna have to go to the grocery store to put aside deal. So like, how do you see the pragmatic encroachment for the actors, the listeners? You believe it's like they commit at some point to something that they hold dear as part of their identity, their community, their value, their ways of living. Otherwise, they just want to function.
So my answer, I'm gonna look at this from a metacognitive perspective. Asher Koryat had a brilliant quotation that I've never been able to dig up in a written form, but the idea is that we do not have privileged access to truth, right? We cannot, in most situations, know what's true or not true. What we have is confidence. We have access to how confident we are that something is true or not true. Now, I think I would tend to agree that most people would equate what they believe to be with truth. But I think what he's trying to tell us is that, you know, there's a reason for why we would study something like confidence. And that's because it in reality substitutes for truth in many occasions.